Hi, my name is Douglas Alexander. I'm running for Congress in Wisconsin's 2nd District. The number one issue that I'm running on is term limits for Congress. The way that most people think it should work is 3 terms in the House, and then you're gone, and 2 terms in the Senate, and then you cannot run again. We already have term limits on the president, right? He or she can only run or serve two terms. Why don't we have it on the House? Well, the short and the Senate. The short answer to that question is we have career politicians in Congress, and they want to stay in power as long as possible and enjoy the perks thereof. I'm running on the number one issue of getting term limits on Congress. Sorry, Carolyn. I don't have this perfectly memorized. Now, I'm a bit of an unusual candidate. I'm independent, neither Democrat or Republican, and you'll see right away that I'm doing things a little bit differently than most. The first thing I want to say is, although we have some major issues in this country, which I love, it's a wonderful country, it's the best country in the world. We have some major issues. A lot of them cannot be solved through politics. They run deeper than politics. And so, although I think politics are important, that's why I'm running for Congress, I think getting term limits on Congress will be a huge benefit to our political landscape and atmosphere. But we can't solve everything through politics, and I just want to kind of put that out there from the start. Secondly is I am going to put the focus on somebody else right at the start here. There's a 5-minute video that is just excellent on giving a broad overview on the benefits of term limits. It's kind of funny. In fact, I think it's hilarious. It's an actual Senate hearing in which a guy named Nick Tomboulides just lets them have it. And it's fun to watch, and I encourage you to watch it right now. So if you are on my website, you'll see that it's right next to mine, this video. Please just click on it. It takes 5 minutes. I think you'll learn a lot, and then come back to this one. If you are not on my website, if you search on these 4 words, term limits opening remarks, it will come up. It's a Senate hearing. Again, the man's name is Nick Tomboulides. Of course, if you are just listening to the audio, if you are perhaps a mother at home that's changing a diaper right now and multitasking, or if you are driving in the car or whatever, listening to the audio, we'll just move on with this, and I encourage you at some later point to watch that video. Okay. We're back. Some of you have watched that video. If you have, you know that this is serious. This is a movement, and I am one small part of it, and I'm inviting you right now to be one small part of it. You do not have to sign anything if you don't want to. You do not have to give any money if you don't want to. Just tell yourself, I'm for term limits for Congress, and I'm part of the movement. That's all you need to do, at least at the beginning here. We'll get into it, but the majority of the population, both Democrat, Republican, Independent, are all in favor of term limits. Okay, again, sorry, Carolyn. So I want to ask you to dream with me as if we've just passed a constitutional amendment that term limits Congress. 3 terms in the House, 2 in the Senate. Now, some of you are not going to want to dream with me because you're going to say something like, Douglas, I'm with you. I want to see term limits on Congress too, but it is never going to happen. And what I want to say to you is, it can happen. Just dream with me here. The reason it can happen is you're thinking that the only way we get a constitutional amendment is we have to get Congress to propose a constitutional amendment, and they will never vote to do that. That's like asking a turkey to vote for Thanksgiving. It's just not going to happen. Well, the good news, you may not be aware, is that there is an alternate way to amend the Constitution that we have never done yet in our 200-year history, but it's right there in the Constitution. And it was put in there to address a situation when the problem was, for instance, Congress. And all we need to do, instead of having Congress propose an amendment to the Constitution, we have 2/3 of the states propose an amendment to the Constitution. So they would do this by calling a convention of states, and they would send delegates, get together in a meeting. They would say, we are here, we've been called here to propose an amendment to the Constitution. It is to term limit members of Congress. They work out the actual wording of it, then they send it back to the states, and then just like any other proposed constitutional amendment, it takes 3/4 of the states, or 38, to ratify it. One other thing, some of you are saying, yes, Douglas, I'm aware of this. I'm aware of this alternate path to amend the Constitution so we can get around Congress. But the trouble with that is it could become a runaway convention and they could turn our whole country into a dictatorship if they wanted to. That's not true. Believe me, I can disabuse you of that in a few minutes if you send me an email or we get a phone call. If you think that you're worried about a runaway convention, let me just tell you that it takes a while to find all the data, but in 2006, the congressional class of 2006 proposed 64 amendments to the Constitution. 64. The class of 2008 proposed 78. And the 2010 Congress class proposed 90. Do you see the trend? It's increasing. So if you're worried about a runaway convention, we already have one. It's called Congress. So don't worry about crazy amendments changing the tenor of our country. That's not a serious concern. Okay, so I've asked you to dream with me. Let's say we wake up today and it's the first election coming up after term limits have already been passed in Congress. That means anyone in the House of Representatives that has been there for more than 6 years cannot run for re-election. Doesn't that just sound exciting? And anyone in the Senate who's been there for more than 12 years, 2 terms, cannot run for re-election. It sounds crazy, but if you think about this for a minute, I'm a bit of a political science junkie here. That's why I'm running for Congress. But think about it. No one in Congress who's been there for more than 2 years in the Senate, 2 terms in the Senate or 3 in the House, is allowed to run for re-election. It would just be amazing. That next election would have over 200 new faces in the House of Representatives. The Senate would probably have over 50 or 60. It's a brand new day and a brand new ball game. So I want you to dream with me. In this situation, we have term limits in Congress. Your district, the incumbent is not able to run again. It's going to be 2 new, it's called an open election, a new Republican, a new candidate, a new Democrat candidate, perhaps an independent candidate or 2. But it's going to be a new face in your district. Who would you like that to be? Who would you like that to be? It may be somebody that you think is just really sharp and has a good drive and a good leadership capability, abilities, high integrity. It may be your personal medical doctor. It may be a neighbor. It may be somebody at work, maybe the CEO of where you work that you just think is really sharp and capable. It may be the pastor or the priest where you go to church. Or it may be a member of your church. Or if you don't go to church, even if you do, it may be somebody in some other organization, a sports team, somebody in your country club. Whatever it is, somebody in your community that you think is really sharp, really capable, that you'd like to see represent you in Congress. Take a minute to think of who that might be. I'm going to throw out just a couple names in the second district here in Wisconsin. There's a woman named Judy Faulkner who started Epic Systems, big company, very successful in healthcare. If Congress ever decided to tackle healthcare, she would be someone who I would like to see a part of the conversation. Now, I don't know if she's a Democrat or Republican. I'm an independent. I'm more concerned about our healthcare system and getting the best solution possible for it. I think she'd be a great person to represent us. Another man I'm thinking of, again, I don't know. His name is Kevin Conroy, and he started Exact Sciences, a very successful technical company here in Madison. Anything to do with business, and he's also healthcare. I think he'd be a great person to send to Congress. The last one I'll mention is the most senior tenured pastor in the Madison area. He's an African-American man, very sharp, Dr. Alex G. He's the one of the three whom I actually know. I've not talked with him about running for Congress, but believe me, I would if we had term limits. I think he'd be great for 2 years. And so this is the point. Think about the person who you would like to represent you in your district, whether you're in Wisconsin's second district or some of you viewing this may even be from another state. Would that man or woman be willing, even if they knew they could win, say, listen, if you run, you're going to win. Even if they knew they were going to win the election, would they want to go to Congress for more than, say, 2 years? They have a successful career, right? Now, maybe you're thinking of someone who is just retired that maybe could go for 2, 4, 6 years. But if they're in the senior part of their career, if they're in their 50s or 60s and are in a big area of responsibility, they're not going to want to go to Congress for very long, right? Well, that's a good thing. Because right now, anyone who goes to Congress has to sit around because of the seniority system, which is not mentioned in the Constitution. Congress does not have to have a seniority system. And if you stop and think about it, how stupid is it that in a democratically elected body like Congress, instead of electing their leaders based on abilities and skills and leadership, they give them seniority? Does that make any sense? Think about the company where you work, if you're working. Does it make sense to make the number one person in your company the one who's been there the longest? What if you're in a school? If you looked on the school staff as to who had been there the longest, it would probably be one of the janitors. And frankly, that might be the best thing for that school, to make the janitor the principal. The seniority system is just crazy. So if the person you're thinking of that you'd like to represent us in Congress, if he or she were to get elected under the current system, they would have to sit on the back bench for probably 8 to 10 years before they started to get some leadership, like the committee of the chairmanship of a subcommittee. It takes that long. Nowadays, under the current rules, without term limits, the person you would like to see represent you in Congress, they would never bother to run. They don't want to become a career politician. They already have a successful career. But you're dreaming with me, right? In this new world, this brand new day in which term limits have already been set on Congress, somebody like the three I was mentioning or the person you're thinking of, they might be willing to go for 2 years. For 2 years is all. And then they would come back and get back into their career. Okay, there's another question you might have. I hope this is beginning to dawn on you how exciting it would be to have term limits in Congress. But here's another question your person might have. They might say, yeah, I could see myself in Congress, But even 2 years would be tough because I have this company I'm running, or I have this business that I own, or I have other things I want to do. Well, here's the dirty little secret. Right now, junior members of Congress, because they're riding the bench in the back and don't have high levels of responsibility within the structure of hierarchy of Congress, they are basically assigned to raise money. I call it a dirty little secret. It's not a secret. If you search on 60 Minutes, and if you look on my website, I have the 60 Minutes video right there for you to watch. They did an expose on this a number of years ago, and they showed congressmen talking about, yes, every day I had to go for a couple hours into a party-owned building off of the federal land and call my constituents and ask for money. Just like a sales rep is cold calling for business, they're calling for money. And they're raising money for their own re-election campaign as well as for their party. Well, that's another whole discussion. We can have that in another video. But with this one, let me just say that there is time. If somebody doesn't worry about re-election and raising money, they have time while they're in Washington to spend an hour or two emails, Zoom calls, keeping up their business. They would be able to keep it going for 2 years. And of course, they're not always in Washington. They come back to their district for big chunks of time. They could make it work. All right, so I've gone through a number of little bunny trails here. Now we're back to asking you to dream with me about this new world in which term limits are in place. Let's say the person that you and I want to represent us has agreed to run for Congress, and let's say they actually win. How fun to be able to follow them to Congress, knowing they're only going to be there for about 2 years, and knowing that they're going on a mission. So let's say that the person that you were interested in having represent you is an expert in healthcare, like some of the ones that I am. Let's say that not only we remember there are like 200 new faces in the House of Representatives. All these new people coming in that are not career politicians. They're only there for 2, maybe 4 years, it depends. They may want to, after 2 years, say, you know what, my mission here is half done, but we never got it completely through. I want to come back, and I'm able, and they get reelected, and they do it for another 2 years, but they can't do it more than 6 years. The next thing I want you to consider in this new world is, what if Congress announced at the end of their 2-year terms each time what their priorities were going to be for the next term? For instance, they might announce, so everyone around the country knows Congress next term is going to take up health care, and they're going to take up immigration, and make these their 2 priorities. Now, they of course would be dealing with many other issues, but these would be the 2 priorities that they would commit themselves to really tackling. Then when our people get there, they are looking around, and frankly, it doesn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican. They're looking for other healthcare experts or other immigration experts, and getting on committees and talking with them, and finding like-minded people within their own party, but also across the aisle in the other party. The beautiful thing about the fact that these people can't get reelected more than 2 or 3 times, and they have lives back in their district that they are keeping up and want to get back to in 2 years probably, is that the party doesn't make that much of a difference. And so they're more interested in getting their job done and finding like-minded people to help them and crafting legislation that works for America, that they're going to go back and live under in the years to come. So the first thing really that we've learned in this little exercise of dreaming about a new world where term limits on Congress already exist is that Congress will attract a completely different person than what currently is in Congress. Career politicians will be no more. And anyone going to Congress knows they can be there for only 2, 4, at the most 6 years. So they're going there to get something done, not to build a career. And the second thing now, as we've been discussing this, is when people get there, they're not going to be as concerned about towing the party line. Another dirty little secret about Congress now is that when people get there to Washington, they're hustled into a caucus back room by their party, Democrat or Republican, and they're basically told two things. You need to raise money, we've already mentioned that, and you need to vote the way we tell you to vote. And if you don't, there'll be two negative repercussions for you. One is, if you want to get reelected, you need to get some, what they call federal money pork, federal pork dollars into your district. And if you don't vote the way we vote, we want you to vote, we're not going to give you very much money. You may get a little bit here and there, but we're not going to give you that new federal prison or that new federal whatever building that you want to bring money that's going to bring jobs and all that into the district. If you don't vote the way we want you to vote, you're not going to get that. The second thing is if when you go up for re-election and you're in a really tight race, we could give you extra money to help you win, but if you don't toe the party line, we're not going to do that. Well, both of those have in common a concern for re-election. But if our representative isn't worried about getting re-elected, then the party, whether it's Democrat or Republican, doesn't have any stick or carrot with which to control them. They can basically act like an independent. I'm going to be an independent. And vote the way they want, build coalitions with whomever on both sides of the party. And their whole mission is not to get reelected, it's to get things done. So the first thing is that Congress would attract different people. The second thing we learned from this is that once they're there, they're going to be motivated to get things done, not to get reelected. The third thing kind of falls in with that is the party's going to have very little power over them. And so party rancor and division, which all of us are so sick of and disgusted with at Congress, I don't want to hear Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi's name ever again. But in this new world, they will not be, they won't care about their party affiliation. And the rancor is going to go much down. There's going to be a lot more cooperation and collaboration between the two parties. And the last thing, hello, Hannah, I'm almost done. You can start reading, I'm almost done. The last thing is lobbyists will not have the power and the authority over congressmen and congresswomen that they do now. Because the main thing a lobbyist offers is money for their re-election campaign. And since that doesn't matter to the congressperson, then the lobbyist doesn't have much more to offer. Now, they have some things to offer. I mean, they can offer to someone, look, if you pass this bill for us, if you work with us on this, whenever you leave Congress, we'll give you a nice fat job in our C-suite. For a career politician that doesn't necessarily have a real business skill, that's a strong draw. But again, for the people that you and I are thinking of represented us in Congress, that's not a draw at all. So lobby influence gets greatly diminished, which means money in campaigns and money in politics gets greatly diminished. And how great is that? I mean, every about decade, there's a push to get money out of politics. And if you've been around the block a few times, like I have, you've seen them. You've heard about these bills. You think, oh, great, finally we're going to get money out of politics. But does it happen? No, suddenly there are these new things called a PAC. And all this money, it turns out, whatever changes they made has made it easier for more money to flow into politics. Now I wonder how that happened, and I wonder why that happened.